Psalm 72 may be considered a messianic psalm. Because of his future tense, it may be pointing to the Messiah, the future king. But let's try to think what was in Solomon's mind when he was writing. Was he aware that his psalm would be a messianic psalm? Or was he writing about himself, but in a prophetic way that psalm could be also applied to the Messiah? Let's think about Solomon himself. He's asking to God, "Give the king your judgments, O God," verse 1, "and your righteousness to the king's son." This is something that we must ask the Lord, require the Lord. That's not automatic. People that are not longing, not seeking for God's judgments, for God's righteousness, they will never receive it. And then on verse 2 he speaks about the consequences of receiving God's righteousness and God's judgments. He say, "And then I will judge," or the king will judge your people with righteousness and your poor with justice. Poor stands for the less favored. And how are we judging God's people and less favored? Maybe you can say, "Well, I am not a king. That psalm it not apply to me," but it can apply to you, because to each one of us, there is a leadership position that is given. Maybe in your family environment, maybe in the job, or in the church, you have a leadership position. So if we are leaders, all leadership belongs to God. That's what I'm meaning. And all human leadership is borrowed from God, and we must pay account to God about our leadership. And so if we ask God for his righteousness and for his judgments, he can give us that. And then we will judge, we will lead in righteousness, we will defend the less favored ones. And the psalm speaks about the dominion God will give to this king that is asking for God's judgments and for righteousness. For instance, verse 8 says, "He shall have dominion also from sea to sea." So that dominion in leadership is related. God's given dominion is related to asking God for his judgments and for his righteousness. That's why a king was supposed to write the law all the days of his life, because by doing that, God's judgments will be inscribed on their hearts. And then this psalm also speaks about the supremacy or the authority of that king, verse 9. Also, reinforcing the care for the less favored on verse 12. And also on verse 15, the economic prosperity of the king that will look for God's righteousness and for God's judgments. And also the fame of the person. Verse 17 says, "His name shall endure forever." Would you like to have your name enduring forever? Forever, I mean forever, eternally speaking. Let's do the same thing. Let's look for God's requirements, for God's judgments, and for his righteousness. We can do that today, just now. God bless you.